Hello.
Hey, Henrik.
Hey, good
How are you?
afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Very good, and you?
Good, thank you. Very good. Very good. We do have quite a lot on the agenda today, but with it being an off-cycle meeting, I am not sure how many people we're going to have turn up.
Let's see.
But we kind of need to progress.
So for the summary of the SCOT workshop, I didn't prepare very much. I would just, walk the people a little bit through the agenda and maybe highlight a couple of talks that I personally found noteworthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I think that'd be really useful. Any papers, presentations you'd recommend to the individuals to chase up on, that sort of thing, that'd be great. 5 or 10 minutes, that sort of thing. You could go as long as 10, I'm sure. No problem at all.
Great.
So let's give a few people a few minutes. Hopefully it's more than just you and I. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
John, Jeff. As usual, if people wouldn't mind popping into the notes and updating it with attendance, that'd be great. Shaq, welcome back. I'll pop the
microphone on. G'day.
Right. Send the link. Welcome.
Just you and me,
Saki.
Jonathan? Hi, guys.
Nope. Welcome, Saki.
Yeah, welcome.
No. As I sort of briefly mentioned, because it's an ad hoc meeting, we usually meet on Thursdays. We might have less people, but I think there's quite a lot going on, so it's worthwhile trying to circulate this again. Give it one more minute and I think we'll start and people can fill in. I know a couple of people said that they were going to be able to attend. A few people are going to miss. First of all, the most important thing of the entire meeting is any volunteers to be the scribe. Dan, who is usually the best scribe I've ever witnessed, unfortunately suggested he may be late today. Any takers?
I'm losing my voice, so it works well for me.
Excellent. All right, thanks very much, Shaq. All right, so what, should we start? And I think we'll just get people to catch up as other people join in. That's all right. So any new friends? I think Zaki, you're probably, and Jeff, do you want to introduce yourselves, gentlemen?
Yeah, sure. I'll have two. My name is Jeff. I work for Sonosite, work with Brian Fox directly. Been involved over on the education SIG and the best practices working group. And I think through Brian and Jonathan, there's a suggestion I come join this group as well, because I think some similar stuff's going on. So happy to help. I work on the dev advocacy, digital advocacy part of DevRel at Sonosite. So, but done a bunch of stuff there. So, yeah.
Welcome, Jeff. Zaki.
Hi guys, I'm Zach. I work for Checkmarks. 2 years ago, I founded Dustico. We were focused about detecting attackers in code packages. I run the supply chain, detecting malicious packages in Checkmarks. Happy to join. Before that, I was actually a threat analyst. So my background is less developer, more threat intelligence oriented. So happy to join the call, guys.
Thanks very much. Hey, Brian, you just missed the intro. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Brian Fox, co-founder, CTO at Sodatype.
Thanks so much, guys. Right, so first part of the agenda, Henrik, you were going to give us an update about it's scored, isn't it? The conference,
exactly. Yeah? All right, yeah. So 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure to attend the first edition of the SCORT workshop. It was co-hosted with the CCS conference in LA. Took place on November 11th. It was co-hosted with the CCS, co-located. And John was asking me whether I can quickly walk you through the different papers or provide kind of a recap summary of my takeaways. Yeah, as I said, it's the first edition, but according to the organizer, Santiago Arias Torres from, I think, Purdue University said it was pretty well received. So they received many submissions and they plan to do this in the upcoming years, probably also with CCS. They had 12 workshop papers, a keynote from Trevor Rosen from GitHub, as well as a panel session with Justin Kappos, Chinmay Sharma. She was a legal person from the University of Texas. Kathleen Moriarty, Center for Internet Security, and Dinesh Manoharan, Intel. Maybe you know some of those guys already. So my summary of the event overall, I must say it was rather academic. So I guess there's relatively little that end users can use out of the box in order to apply this in their day-to-day work effort securing the supply chains. So myself, I was present with 2 sessions. In the one I presented, or we presented together with my former colleague at SAP, the Risk Explorer, which is this taxonomy and this visualization of this taxonomy of threats for software supply chains. And the second paper we were presenting were first steps towards detecting malicious Java archives using different characteristics we would find in the bytecode of downloadable from Maven Central or the like. So this is really so the Risk Explorer is relatively mature, and maybe you have followed the TAG that John created and this effort to move it to the OpenSSF. This other work on Java is in its early infancy, I would say, and the SAP colleagues keep on working on this to make this more effective. Right, for the other talks, maybe a few highlights that I liked a lot. The keynote was from Trevor Rosen, who runs the package security engineering team at GitHub. I think it's around about 8 people. And what I liked a lot is he described how he will use, or they will use Sigstore in order to have secure future NPM deployments. And so the mantra he repeated a couple of times was that open source should be also built in the public, not only the source should be public. And so he was showing an architecture how to use Sigstore together with this NPM deployment processes so that you would have attestations that a certain NPM artifact has been built in a public cloud and deployed on NPM using this full geo, I think, and Raycore as the transparency log. So that was a very nice thing. You know, whether he's going to share the slides though. Right. There was noteworthy, what I liked also from the panel discussion which really stuck with me is the statements of Chinmay Sharma, so this legal person from the University of Texas, who was making a case for making software vendors liable in the future. As for other engineering professions, she was expressing some, let's say, surprise maybe, or he was advocating the same things that also happen for software engineers and software vendors. So that is maybe, if ever this happens, something that is relevant, very relevant for all of us. That was a little bit of a provocative question. I was asking her whether maybe all these industry efforts and support of the OpenSSF maybe will be used at a later point, or can be used at a later point by the industry to say, well, we already do so much, maybe skip this part on the liability. Interestingly, her feedback was that when she was following discussions, several vendors apparently are not so much opposing this idea of liability. I found this quite interesting. I think other noteworthy talks that I can maybe just copy and paste the
I was going
into.
to say, Henrik, if there were any sort of links you could share, that would be handy. Or if it was actually on the website. Yeah.
No, I just copied the program to the chat, and so there you have and I guess the papers are not available for download here, but I guess on Google Scholar or somehow you find them. One thing that I found interesting was a good talk. The first one actually was policy transparency, and this guy from Google Research, Andrew Ferraiolo, proposed a kind of formal language on the basis of data log. I don't remember one or the other data log to formulate policies in regards to consuming artifacts. So there will be claims by people producing artifacts, such as this artifact has been subject to those and those security tests. And so these claims will be put into a transparency log. And then you have a policy language to express policies like, I would only like to consume those and those artifacts that meet this and this and this criterion. I found this quite an interesting work. Other than that, let me just quickly go over the program. I also liked the work of the University of Geneva that was in the second session, which was about automatic security assessments of GitHub Action workflows. This thing also a relatively important topic that they addressed. I think they had a handful of different security problems that they would be able to find in badly configured GitHub workflows. Let me see. And what I also liked, and maybe I can conclude with this, is and as part of the third session was a paper called Exorcist, Automated Sequential Analysis to Detect Compromises in Closed Source Software Supply Chain. So while many people look at the open source attacks, this guy did a differential analysis of closed source malware. I think he had a look at NotPetya, CC Cleaner. I think both are from attacks from 2017, and also Sunburst. All in all, 10 or so samples, mostly DLL. And we tried to understand, or they tried to understand from the University of Oxford, where would be differences from a benign version and then the malicious DLL that would have the malware injected, in terms of, did they use obfuscation or no obfuscation? Was there additional complexity, which could be an indicator of using some packer logic? So that was also a very nice talk. But again, nothing that really anybody of us can use out of the box, I'm afraid. Right, that I think were my main takeaways. Yeah.
Okay, Henrik, thank you very much for that. I think a lot of this at the moment, there are some good tools, I think, starting to come through, or well, it's quite a lot of tools starting to come through from it that will be leverageable from an end user perspective, but a chunk of it, from what I can see, is still R&D. I don't know if everyone else has seen that, really, but yeah. So good to keep up on some of this, but ultimately I'll get to a tool we can use. All right. Thanks, Henrik. And the next one we had on the agenda is the example architectures and the proposal to the TAC. So you, myself, and I think Abdullah from JP Morgan had added some to the example architectures. Should we just have a couple of minutes telling people where they are? Because I think there's also a request for assistance on some of that.
Yeah, John, where's the link to that? I did not see it. You're not talking about the proposal, right?
No, the proposal is linked in the
No, I have that. I didn't see the sample architectures. That's different, right?
That is true, Henrik. The actual architectures we were going through a couple of weeks ago. Are they public or?
Yes, they are public for anybody having the link, which I just put again into the chat. And I think I also included in the Slack channel.
Thank you. Let me paste that. Oh, actually,
Yeah.
don't want to tread on your toes, Jack, and scribe them for you, but let me pop them in. Should we take a look? Do you want to screen share, or we just have a quick look at them?
I can screen share, yes.
Yeah. Well, while we're going through, let me sort of talk to it. So we'd got together, a couple of us got together, and we had started to map out high-level architectures, and Henrik has done all the work, frankly. You've done all the work on the large organization and potentially a smaller organization. Now, remember that the last time we were talking about this, we had decided not to particularly call it large or small, but in the absence of anything else at the moment, it seems rational to at least start doing this and somehow come up with a third one. But reviewing these architectures and also looking back to the threat model that we'd published before, all of the data that we had in the threat model is or should be in these diagrams, just at a more abstracted level. So my thoughts on this was it was reasonable, adding more data into it. Henrik, do you want to speak to the slide?
Yes. So I started really with I think on the TAC you mentioned 3 or 4 organizations. One was a larger development organization, and then 2 consumer organizations, a regular one and a regulated one, like a hospital. And I started with development organizations. A small one where basically everything happens in the cloud. There is no legacy, there is no own infrastructure. They only have everything on a hosted Git like GitHub, GitLab. They use also cloud-based CI/CD systems and so forth. A small development organization, right? And the other one is a large development organization, also with heavy internal reuse components, kind of a mixture of having things in the cloud, in the public cloud, as well as running internal solutions in the internal cloud. So all the SAST scanners that exist, some of them being hosted in-house and some of them outside. Right. And so this is the small development organization. It basically continues the thoughts and kind of a sketch. I mean, basically distinguishes the source code, version control system, the build system, and then the distribution platforms. Distribution platforms could be anything like package repositories, application marketplaces, websites, wherever people basically publish the thing that they build, the thing that they provide to their downstream users. And those distribution platforms is also the term that we have used to denote those systems from where they download their open source dependencies, but also all the other components that are used during the development lifecycle, basically, including the stuff that ends up on developer workstations on the very left-hand side. So you really have this flow from the left to the right, where the source code flows from the brain of the development teams through the workstation, or the right to the right on the distribution platform, and from there to the user.
Henrik, quick question.
Shoot questions.
Yeah. In this graph, does the red third party assume also closed source proprietary software?
Yes, we didn't differentiate it. We made it more explicit in the second picture, and that was one of the comments from Don that we should include it. We made it more clear here, where we have commercial third party on the top, and then open source on the bottom. And so I think the same applies also to this small development organization. I just didn't copy and paste the same boxes on the previous. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
makes
you
the
just
diagram a bit
mentioned
uglier.
commercial versus open source. So I'm trying to clarify that. Let's use the same text. I mean, open source is certainly commercial, right? Or can be commercial. Did you mean, when you said commercial, did you mean proprietary or closed source?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That is maybe
Thank
a
you.
better term. Yeah.
It makes for a difficult diagram to perhaps pass, or a harder diagram to pass, but I think it is the reality in that there are multiple bits of closed source code as well as the open source bits that are going to be in these distribution mechanisms, right?
Very much so.
So
Yeah. So, right. Go on, please.
No, I was just going to add to that, right? I mean, these are initial views on, and I think one of the things we were looking at doing was trying to put together some assumptions. So it's not just this is a diagram, but this would be an assumption, you know, a small group, you know, 5 to 10 person company, building some functionality, not heavily regulated. I think it's useful, in addition to the diagram, to actually have some starting assumptions to guide people what we're actually trying to threat model and what the example is. Right down to the, well, they're not building anything, they're just consuming software, because I think there's obviously far more companies doing that. So that's definitely work to come.
And so I don't know whether it makes sense to, I guess it's the ideas become clear looking at this small development organization. The bigger development organization just adds a lot of additional, basically, data flows and systems to this diagram that we thought maybe cannot be connected in a reasonable way to the build system in particular. Right, so maybe notable differences is to have internal repositories like Nexus, JFrog, and so forth. That will be used to mirror internal application dependencies, internal reuse components, as well as external open source or third-party commercial proprietary components. And then other notable differences are this inner source contributor. So this here, the idea being that in a bigger development organization, at least many promote inner source, so open source concepts to the inside of a company. And the addition of this inner source contributor, the idea behind is to basically also cover insider threats in this threat model.
Jack, you've got your hand up. Do you want to raise a question?
Yeah, just some bike shedding. I'd suggest private repository instead of internal repository. I know at Shopify we use Cloudsmith, which is not sort of strictly internal to us, but is private.
Great. If I may also add, one of the things that we were debating was the actual names of products. We probably can't put names of products in. We need to delete them. But in the initial sort of ideation, we were trying to make sure that we all knew what we were talking about. But I think it's not, you know, we are going to have to delete that for obvious reasons.
And here maybe another important decision that we had to take at some point in time. Of course, there are a zillion ways how a bigger organization would you know, set up the development environment and their systems, the landscape. And so here we decided to basically have an in-house source code management system, which could be, again, GitHub Enterprise running in that company, or Git and Garbage in combination, as well as also you have an in-house build system that is hosted by that company, like Jenkins, Tekton, or maybe even custom built environments. But that was a choice, an assumption that we had to take at some point in time. I'm not sure whether it makes sense to have all possible, or whether it's even possible to have all, you know, variations, combinations. honestly, I don't have a very good idea on how to get around this. So what would be the most common useful assumption to?
I think also those additional roles, I just added a lot of additional roles based upon the old threat model instead of connecting to every single box we have in the architecture is pointless, but at least we highlighted these are roles that are involved in the process at some point.
Mm-hmm. And maybe also one notable difference when you look at SALSA and kind of this very the diagram that they use for pointing out different threats. One notable difference is also this presence of the workstation, right? So the system of the developer having Visual Studio Code or whatever else IDE with plenty of plugins downloaded, which we thought makes sense to be included in such a model.
Yeah, strong +1 on
that. John, if you're editing, you might want to change that title in the red block, the commercial third party, and then below it open source. How about just the third party?
I think Henrik's editing.
Oh, okay. Couldn't tell who was editing.
It's me.
Would it be closed source or
closed source? It's, I think, a better distinction.
Any votes, or was it closed source or proprietary or commercial?
So
I think we said.
So here's the challenge, right? Most proprietary software today contains open source. You know, whether it's from traditional vendors that we view as closed source, such as Oracle or SAP. SAP has a huge amount of open source in their products, right? So, do we want to maybe mention where does that get taken into consideration here? Because they're coming as packaged software, it doesn't fit below where open source under the open source box.
I see where you're going. Okay.
Yeah, for me, what is really downloaded and also uploaded are kind of binaries and quotes, these archives, zips, and those binaries, of course, can contain open source itself. So if I download, so it would be rebundled, repackaged open source that is included in a binary that I download from some commercial proprietary third party.
I think Jacques, you just +1 to that. Sound a bit. Trying to save your voice. Does that make sense? I see where you're going. Should we go with that for now and then come back, perhaps circle back to it?
I mean, it's in some way this is represented, right? So here on the build system, here in the very middle, you would at some point in time download all the dependencies, the open source dependencies that are required to build a certain commercial solution, which is then embedded into such an archive binary, whatever you want to call it, before it is then uploaded on the commercial software provider website or whatever else application store. So that is how I would reflect kind of the reuse and bundling of open source by commercial.
Just thinking, in the interest of time, perhaps what we're really looking for at this point is that continued next ad hoc session. So we've been discussing this a couple of times. It'd be good to get additional members' feedback into this. Remember, this is really we're going to the SAC with the proposal, but assuming that that's put forward, I think this is useful material anyway. So we're just getting together as a group to start to put that together. So I think we need to add into the minutes, if people are available, interested in assisting, it would be good to get further input into this and come back to the group at a later date. Any offers of support warmly accepted. Great work, Henrik. You're certainly doing the lion's share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Moving on to the next one, but unfortunately, Mitch, I don't think can join us today on the ad hoc one. Mitch had offered to update the GitHub pages. Obviously, when we became a fully fledged working group, we were given GitHub and all sorts of other great stuff. So Mitch has offered to do that and was going to present back some updates to the group. What I'll probably ask is if you can perhaps just send a link or an email to the Slack and we can take a look at it. Just give it the thumbs up next time. I think that'll be useful. Okay, next thing on the agenda is the supply chain total feedback, which clearly we need a different name for that. But this was a proposal I made last session. It was really more of a discussion or a comment for discussion. And it was really a thought around how we could get together as a group and collate malicious data or vulnerability data into a single repository so that we can get early warning of perhaps changes in the attacks that the industry is undergoing, so that we can then start to tune what we're ingesting from our end users and members and get a better understanding of what's going on. It turns out that at the same time I was proposing that, Andrew, you'd highlighted that you were at the Lake Tahoe meeting, and I think someone from Zach, your organization, was proposing something similar. So I'd reached out and asked Zach if you wouldn't mind sort of sharing some of your thoughts, and maybe we can have that wider discussion here, if that's reasonable.
Be happy to. So first of all, I think that again, coming from the same experience that we all have, we need to understand that, of course, everything is changing, right? So there is no right answer. Where will be the perfect protection, because the attackers are always changing their tactics. We felt that we need the open source community or the open source security research community to come and help us. So for every publication that we have, we try to do two things. We try to focus not necessarily on the code, because the code will always change. We don't have a malicious package problem. We have people attacking the open source ecosystem problem. So trying to understand what are the tactics and the trends that we are seeing, and giving access to researchers, because one of the things that I do see is that in other places, when a university want to research or try to develop a new kind of ML, they need some data. And right now, most of the data is just being deleted by the package repositories. We report on a large number of packages, and they are just being deleted. So anybody coming into this field and want to have easy idea, easy approach, and I don't think there is one good approach, is difficult to start, because he doesn't have any data to try to train his model or anything like that. So we have made large contribution to backstabbers, and I really like it. But I do think that, yeah, I think we are the biggest contributor there. But I do think maybe something a bit more formalized, working as a community, maybe with the package repositories, maybe sharing some metadata, not just the code himself, could be useful. Because this is basically what we're doing. Like we are every time we found something, we look at what the attacker is doing. There are so many missing gaps. In so many cases, the same attacker is doing the same thing in PyPy, in NPM, and those package repositories don't talk together. So it stay undetected for a very long time. So we started at small. We basically said, whenever somebody needs some kind of package, and unfortunately right now they are deleted, we'll set up a quick portal. We're happy to share every evidence that we have, so people can come up and take their own approach. I basically want a bit more than that. I think maybe we need a better coordination between ourselves. Coming from the AV industry, we used to share samples, not the signatures, but the samples.
Yep. So
it was effective for all of us to have the same database and sharing stuff. But even started with, again, let the open source ecosystem help us protect again open source, give him the tools. We were actually thinking about contributing some of our internal tools. When you look at a package, like we have some tools that automatically extract the install script and suspicious strings. And if there's a URL, test that URL against an AV.
Can I just jump in for a second, Zach? Jack, you got your hand up there?
Sorry.
To raise a question?
Yes. Well, the happy news I can share is that this is almost an identical conversation to one we've had in the Securing Software Repositories group, where all the repository folks hang out. We've also had researchers come there and say exactly the same thing. Package repositories are deleting the packages as soon as they're identified as malicious, which means there's nothing for researchers to work with. So it is on our radar to set up such a repository, such a shared place where researchers can be vetted and then allowed access to that information, to those samples. It hasn't got much further than we should do this because we have sort of competing priorities like everybody does. And it's a small group, heavily, unusually salted with volunteers compared to most of the working groups. Even this working group is like professionals, so to speak. So I am very interested in ensuring that we are on the same page. Our view is that ideally that repository would be operated by the OpenSSF as a neutral party that also has a great deal of know-how to navigate any antitrust issues. There's also a related effort to set up general data collection. So things as simple as download counts and dependency counts to whatever data we can gather into a single place, into a normalized schema, into a consolidated schema might be a better description, across ecosystems, because we've also realized that, like, similarly, it is time consuming and difficult for researchers to perform cross ecosystem research. So we want to make that as easy as possible. So those are two initiatives that I think rhyme or are almost identical with what you're proposing, and I'm excited to hear it.
Sounds excellent. I'd like to add to that point, but Andrew, you had your hand up. Do you want to go next? Just
a real quick comment for Zach. I hope I pronounced that correct. Your presenter at the summit had mentioned that the Checkmarx was potentially going to create a database of behavioral attacker information and open source that.
So what we're doing right now, and again, this is more on the ideation stage right now, we do think that it is beneficial to all of us to try to understand. And for example, every report that we have, we share that report, and I still missing the taxonomy. Like for MITRE, there's a clear taxonomy to describe the attacks, and I think everybody's like calling brand jacking or typo squatting or things like that. I think that will be an initial step before submitting that. But I do think that this is something this is like the next steps. Once we have the data, now the conclusion and what do we have. So we are working on that. And it's not as close as I want to, because there are like missing steps. First, we collect the data, analyze the data, find the attackers, find the TTPs. And the next step would be, let's try to share it in a similar fashion, because what will happen next, and I've done the same process with the normal cyber industry, is we need some kind of a sticks format, because if everybody is like publishing a PDF and you need a human to read it and to understand what the writer meant, that won't have the effect that we want.
Yeah. Zach, if I could jump in here. So a couple of things. So you mentioned the taxonomy there, so it's great. So we, as part of this group, we've adopted the taxonomy that Henrik and team had put together for part of the backstabber's knife presentation and such, and that's one of our proposals to the TAC. And the way that I'd sort of framed this capability of collating all of this data is a way of maintaining, in a way, our taxonomy and our threat models, because at the moment we're intuiting what we believe the market is, or the threat landscape looks like. We're putting together our architectures. We're understanding our mitigations. We're defining what open source OSSF programs we need to back and where SALSA and SSDF fits. But what I'd like to do here is have that capability up front where we're analyzing the threat landscape and then informing and validating our threat models and our taxonomy as we go. If you find, for example, a new type of attack, then we can make sure that, well, it's missing from taxonomy. Let's ensure we update it. Let's update the threat models. Let's identify we've got an attack that we're missing a mitigation for, or, you know, and do that as well as making sure that we notify everyone downstream and our end users. And because one of the concerns I have with threat models in these architectures is they go stale as soon as you write them. And this is a way of kind of keeping it all connected. So great to see a +1 on the taxonomy. This is kind of where I see it fitting with the other one. And then I think my third point, if I will, is that I'd like to, a lot of hands up, but I'd like to circle back and figure out, right, how do we move this forward? Because there's a lot of interest just from this group. There's Jacques, you've got another group. I want to see if we can collate that going forward and perhaps get together with these other people. But I'll cede the floor. I think it was to Henrik, I think was next up.
Yeah, I don't remember the order of who raised the hand first, but maybe we even have the same comment. So thank you, Doug, for pointing out this other initiative. A couple of weeks or maybe even months ago, I came across an OpenSSF document which described exactly this, collecting supply chain attacks and then the actual samples like we did with this Backstabber's Knife collection. The problem back then, and I'm not sure whether this was resolved in the meantime, is that what they called supply chain attacks also included the attacker exploiting known vulnerable open source components, which I think is not a good idea to mix up in one bucket. I'm not sure whether they have addressed this or changed the scope a little bit in the meantime, but just wanted to say that we should be only on malicious open source packages, not on this common, well-known in quotes problem of non-vulnerability.
I totally agree, Henrik. I think that sometimes the taxonomy is vulnerable, malicious, is malicious, vulnerable, get people confused. And it's a different mitigation, it's a different risk, it involves a different technology stack to solve. And I totally agree that is some of the, I would, for example, I have no problem with going one way or the other, calling malicious malicious or calling malicious vulnerable, just be concise with it, because most of the malicious package being discovered aren't being tracked as CVE. So I have no problem if we decide it's a vulnerability and let's track it. But the problem is it's in between. So sometimes we refer to it as vulnerability, but most of them don't have a CVE, meaning, and that's an immediate impact, because when I find a malicious package that was downloaded tens of thousands of times, and I got it reported and it's removed, all the past victims aren't getting notified. Because this isn't tracked as CVE. So I totally agree. This is some of the confusion that sometimes when we try to describe it, there's a mix of what maybe we should track it as CVE because it's convenient. But if you look at the at how CVE is being defined, it doesn't fall under that definition.
Yeah. Pierre, Giorgio, I think you got a hand up there.
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I totally agree with all you said. It's a really something that we must need to achieve as a community. What I wanted to raise is a bit a side problem with which I encountered. I think there is also a little bit of problem when researchers want to notify repositories when there is something malicious in, and not just a single package, but really like 100 packages. So when we will manage to reach a situation in which a lot of researchers will start scanning repositories, I found really cumbersome. For example, in NPM, for example, you need to go through the UI and then you're blocked by CAPTCHAs. And in PyPy, you need to send emails. I think it's really important also, and it's a mutual interest, I think, between the repositories and researchers to come into a unique solution where researchers can just drop what they find, and repositories then will go through the findings and triaging. And another thing I think could be really interesting is to motivate researchers and the community. There exist bug bounty programs, for example, for finding vulnerabilities, but I never saw so far, but probably I'm wrong, something similar for malicious packages. And I think trying to attract the community, it's another key point in my opinion. Yeah.
Thanks, Pierre.
So I
That's
just
good
want,
feedback.
yeah,
Sorry,
just,
go on, Zach.
totally agree. I'm like managing hundreds of email exchange with package repository, trying to understand the mean time to remediation, the mean time to detect, and that's cumbersome. I want to give a big shout out to PyPy. Now they have like an internal tool, and they ask us every time you submit something, submit with this tool. So our analyst, which is a volunteer, doesn't need to go and scan the entire package. So that's the start of a process, but definitely some kind of an API or automation, because I like go back, what time did we send that email? And there is no standard, what we call MTTD or MTTR. So sometimes if you're working with somebody, you will get it resolved quickly. Sometimes you forgot the email. Sometimes you have to remind them. So we need to do the job to make their job easier.
Agree. So in the interest of time, just want to make an additional point and then hand to Jacques. But I do think that we need to raise the awareness of malicious packages much higher from an end user perspective, in that we are tracking vulnerabilities, and people are talking about vulnerabilities and talking about supply chain security. But I don't think malicious packages has quite got to the level of visibility that I think it should be in the end user community. And that's something I think we need to take on as a group. That's number one. Number two, I guess I'm just going to make the point. I think we need to set up a call to talk this through. I'd perhaps partner with yourself, Jacques, with your other group, and figure out who we need to bring into that conversation. Maybe I'll take an action to reach out to yourself, Jacques, and figure out who else to bring to the table. Table a meeting and invite, on the Slack channel, anyone who wants to come to discuss this as a proposal. But I do think there's something there. And we are a little bit short of time, but I'll hand it to yourself, Jacques.
No, in the interest of time, I'll skip.
Okay. No worries at all. Well, thank you very much. Really good conversation there. Looking forward to that one. So next item on the agenda is last call for proposal on feedback. The link is in the notes there. And that's effectively the proposal that we were sending to the TAC about the connected initiative, where it has the architecture, the threat model, figuring out where SALSA and SSDF sit, and then an OSSF, and then back up to this piece at the top. So I had briefly reviewed it with Krobe and a couple of others. If anyone has any additional feedback, if they can put it together in the next 2 days or so, otherwise I will reach out to the TAC and get that scheduled.
So John, I tried to make comments today. I used to have edit access, but do not appear to do so anymore. So I'll send a note to you.
Yeah, please do. I don't know why. Let me figure out what's going on.
I did. If you didn't, I sent one a couple hours ago. A request to edit access. I had a few comments I wanted to put in there.
Great. I will review it and find out why.
Okay.
Okay, next item on the agenda, we had Joshua Locke from the SALSA group reaching out about taxonomy. Did anyone see that on the Slack channel? I think he's reached out to General as well. Any thoughts on the particular taxonomy? I think it was package maintainer they were looking at. We do have a taxonomy and persona document. Anyone got any thoughts? Packaging ecosystem. Thank you, Jack. Any feedbacks on the group?
Surprisingly difficult to define. It's one of those things that's mostly defined by examples that we found when we talked about this in the early days of the Securing Software Repos group, what it should cover, and just saying packaging ecosystem didn't help a lot, because, for example, that would potentially, for some people, exclude things like a Docker repository, which ought to be covered, or distribution like Debian, they distribute software, they have repositories, surely they belong as well. So it's a surprisingly difficult thing. It's easy to think of in terms of source distribution for particular languages or particular sort of ecosystems, but it becomes trickier as you spread out from there. That was our finding at the time. I've brought that also to the attention of the Securing Software Repo group in the Slack channel, and I'll probably bring it up at the next meeting as well for people to look at.
Any other thoughts on that one? I agree, it's pretty difficult. I don't think we called it out particularly in our personas document. Obviously, multiple people leveraging the packaging ecosystem, but we didn't really define it.
I think the part of that definition I'm having a bit of trouble with is other ecosystems are informal, such as conventions used within a company. That can be so widely, just the taxonomy convention can be so widely defined. Is that useful within the framework, within the SALSA framework?
Okay, I guess more to chew on that one. If people have some thoughts off cycle, we can come back to the SALSA team on that one. I don't think it's one of the things that we update necessarily in our personas document, because it's more of just the taxonomy of the system, but just my view.
Is this just for the distribution though, or because my point is like, is the build system included? When you say ecosystem, I think it puts a broader net. So I think, in my opinion, it's more of a package distribution ecosystem, maybe.
It depends, I guess, which one they're looking at. But yeah, could be.
Okay, I'll add comment there. We can move on, John.
That's right. Okay, very good. Next item on the list, we have the working groups list. And then we can bleed into the updates from other groups if anyone has any. I appreciate working groups are popping up all the time. Are there any that people feel we're missing from that list? Or because at the moment it's just myself, Randall, Abdullah's in there. There's a number of different working groups. We don't actually have the securing repositories working group, Shaq. I'm thinking of it.
What about the SC2 something?
That's in there, yeah. Like row 10. Yeah.
Not sure where you're.
Row 10, it's the S2C2F meeting.
Okay.
I guess what we're asking for here as well, is there anyone that is interested in sort of tagging their names to any of those end user groups that provide feedback to the group? Please do so. I'm not going to press gang people into it, but I think it would be beneficial if other people reach out to some of those groups. That'd be useful. And the final one is updates from other working groups. So has anyone got any feedback from other groups over the last couple of weeks that it would be useful to bring any salient points to end user group meeting? Go for it, Shaq.
A fair amount of working groups didn't meet.
That's what I was figuring, Randall.
Yeah. One very quickly from Securing Software Repos, which apparently is my job today, is we put our shared help desk proposal to TAC, and TAC wanted more details. They want it to be more fleshed out before they're prepared to sort of put their stamp on it and send it up to governing board. I would say mainly they were interested in more details of like the day-to-day functioning, how it would fit within the existing organization of the OpenSSF, because the proposal was, like full-time professionals, a professional or professionals. So they want some more detail there. And they also wanted to see what the alternatives were. So the reason I bring this up is as we make proposals to TAC that may include funding requirements, that we should make sure that we sort of cover those bases to get through more smoothly. So the two things I would say are, one, you need to think about how it fits in with the existing staff. So definitely talk to Brian Bellendorf and co. And two, consider whether there are alternatives that you can put to them and why you think funding is the best alternative. And those would be my two pieces of guidance based on our experience.
And that's a great point, because I think the one we just discussed, the sort of supply chain total type thing, that definitely is going to require funding and professional full-time staff. So great feedback. Reach out to detail out
John,
to reach out to Brian. Andrew.
Yeah, I hope a couple members here. I will not be able to make the TAC meeting tomorrow. I hope a couple of the members here will be. John, I think you're planning on that. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So two pieces, if they're not addressed as a part of the agenda, I think it'd be good to understand what are the actual next steps, any specific next steps, especially from the Sterling tool chain discussion during the board meeting. That would be one. The second is on the job descriptions for the 4 or 5 different positions that were approved during the board meetings. I think I just want to make sure that those are being moved forward and that there's not going to be a delay until the beginning of the year. So if we can make sure those two things would be addressed, that'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Great point. I will attend and I'll try and make sure that they're raised. Any other feedback from anyone and any other groups? Well, as I say, I think quite a lot were postponed. Nope. All right. Any other business anyone wants to raise? No. All right. We've got a lot of proposals going on at the moment. I appreciate that. So thanks for adding into that, everyone. We've got, I think, 2 of them ready roughly to go to the TAC. Let's get those through to start with. But a lot of action going on, which is definitely important. Andrew, you want to add?
No, I'm good. I think we're making some progress and bringing some other members into the group. I know this was a bit of a special session, so hopefully we can all we'll see broader participation. Rao, thanks for being here. I think we're going to see hopefully over the next month or so. Had commitments from Boeing and Uber to participate, but they probably won't do so until the beginning of the year. But then I know there's some others that are in play, so I'm excited about that.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are talking about this just on the sort of periphery, and people are trying to join, so it's good to see. All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Hopefully Thanksgiving was good, and sorry we had to move it, but I think there's quite a few things we needed to catch up on before the next one in December. So thanks. Have a great week, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.